So pond edging, probably the most important aspect of a pond build. It's going to make a pond look like a nice feature, and I think it's the one aspect that a lot of people will really struggle on. How to finish off the pond liner, how to conceal the line around the edging, what to do with vegetation or rocks, etc. So this is a job that I've just started today, rolling straight onto the next project, which involves exactly that. A pond that's been in this position for a number of years, and it's been struggling with areas of pond liner that are exposed. Here, growing underneath this lovely acer tree, it's very difficult to get any form of vegetation to grow and to cover over this pond liner, so this bit is always exposed. And it's exposed to UV light, which can really shorten the life of the pond liner, which isn't great, but it also looks unsightly. And so I'm going to be doing a few bits and pieces to conceal exposed pond liner and to create a bit more of a defined edge so that we can prevent some of the wicking and the soaking that you get around the pond where the grass is very wet. This is a lovely pond, it's a good size, it's nicely established, lots of wildlife in there, and most of the edges have established and softened nicely, and there's only a little bit of exposed liner in the shade underneath the acer. But even though this vegetation, this grass and moss is doing a good job of hiding the lining, it does cause issues with a lot of moisture being soaked and wicked out of the pond. This acts like a sponge. So the pond is constantly dropping and needs a lot of topping up. But this is very, very typical, there we go, of pond edging. A lot of people will create a shallow shelf around the edge of the pond, and then they will roll turf or grass so that it comes into contact with the water, and in doing so it will grow, and that's going to very quickly conceal the pond lining, but it's not necessarily the most efficient or effective way of doing so. And there are other things that we can do that will conceal the pond lining that will help to prevent some of that wicking effect. So what I'd like to do here, there's an awful lot of raw material on site, lots of stone. I'll show you the garden in a minute, but it's been beautifully terraced with lots of lovely natural stone, and there's a lot of that material left over. And what I'd like to do is to get the pond drained down so I've got better access around the edge of the pond, to get a lot of this vegetation peeled up to expose all the outer edges of the pond liner, and then to dig down just a little bit so that we can create a level, uniform shelf onto which we can start to position some rocks and cobbles and other various bits and pieces, so that when the pond is filled back up again, we can roll this vegetation back over. We'll still have a nice, soft, natural green edge, but it'll be sitting on top of the rock rather than directly into the water. So it's going to soak away a lot less moisture. The inner edge of the pond will have various bits of stone and natural material poking through, which will look nice and cosmetically improve the appearance of the pond. And we can also incorporate a few planting zones. We can get a few dedicated areas where we can then backfill with shingle to create some proper planting areas that we can plant marginal plants in bare rooted, rather than balancing pots on these shelves. The pond has been done nicely. There's a nice big broad shelf all the way around the edge of the pond, so I've got some lovely stuff to work with. There are some areas of the pond where the lining comes back an awfully long way, and over the years this ground and vegetation has just taken over, so we're actually going to be able to enlarge the pond slightly and get it back to its original footprint in the process. As always with these jobs, first day on site, it's about me setting up base, creating some shelters that I can put my tools, little bolt holes if it rains for me, and I'm just in the process of ringing out one of my big holding tanks so that I can get the level of the pond drained down but reserve and hang on to all that water so we can go back into the pond when I'm finished. This area of the pond here in the shade is quite a challenging area for ponds. It's not easy to grow any marginal plants at all underneath this canopy, and likewise the vegetation and the grass here is never taken, always revealing this exposed bit of pond liner. So this area here I've proposed to dig down a little bit more. It's the low spot of the pond anyway, and this is where the water runs away. So we'll just enlarge that a little bit, and we'll design a beach, an area where we can get some loose stones and gravel and materials and bits and pieces to conceal this pond liner, bringing it out underneath the tree, because again the grass here doesn't grow very well either. So we can make a bit more of a feature of this with some stone, and then have a natural runoff where the ground slopes away behind the pond for the overflow. So many different species of plants that are growing in amongst here. Lots of things that we're going to want to salvage. Also a lot of stuff that we're not going to want to keep. There's lots and lots of this horsetail, and not the nice aquatic Excavating variety. I think it'll be impossible to get rid of this entirely, but if we can lose some of it, all the better. Now before we get too carried away and start to drain the pond down, I've got my holding tank rigged up already. It's important to make a mental note, a reference, take a picture of the pond as it is now, so I get an idea of where the water level is sitting. This is probably a good time to be taking this reference because we've had a fair amount of rain, so I know that the pond isn't artificially lower than it would normally be. Once I've got that reference, I can drop the level of the pond down, but it means that I'll get an idea of where the water level is going to sit in the future. There's a very interesting plant that you don't see very often in ponds, and I like to see it. It's called the water soldier. Looks like a kind of a spiky pineapple top. You can see it down in the water here. And it's an interesting plant. When the water's cool, it sinks down to the bottom, and then as the water temperature starts to rise, it floats to the surface, and then in the midsummer, it has its topmost leaves sticking above the water, just like a pineapple. You can see there's two sticking up towards the back of the pond over there. It does have little flowers as well. Not massively attractive, but they're quite interesting. Now, they can take over. They have runners with little sort of baby satellite soldiers off the sides. When I drain the pond down, I'll dig out some adults and see if we can see some of the babies on the side. But they can take over very quickly, so they do need to be controlled. There's some other interesting plants in here looking. Look at all the midges, tons and tons. But we've got some Potamogetum crispus, some curly leaf pondweed. We've got a little bit of hornwort, which is an excellent oxygenator. We're going to want to keep hold of all of these things. And then around the edges here, we've got some important natives like water mint here, Mentha aquatica. We've got lots of juncus that's just self-seeded from the park behind the fence here. There's also quite an invasive plant here and something that's actually now on the banned list. This is Tilia recurva is one of its names, New Zealand pygmy weed. It's a little succulent that will grow quite happily submersed underwater or above the waterline like this. It's not unattractive, and actually as long as it doesn't take over, it's quite a nice plant to have. Again, it's going to be impossible to get rid of it entirely, but if we do dispose of any, we need to dispose of it responsibly. Some water lily in here. We need to increase the water lilies. We need a few more islands of foliage. We've got some starwort, some calatrice. Looks a bit like duckweed. This is duckweed here on the side. That's classed as a pest, but although, you know, again, in a natural pond, in a native pond, it'll do a certain amount of good in the pond as it strips the pond of nutrients. Now this is calatrice. The leaves on the surface look very similar to the duckweed, but the plant itself is anchored down to the bottom, and it's got some submersed foliage and it sends up these tendrils to the surface. Sort of thing that you see a lot of in lovely crystal clear chalk streams waving around in the current. I hope these guys are not biting midges, because there's an awful lot of them. That's a good sized pond, this. I suppose 25 feet-ish in length and about 15 feet or so in diameter, and a reasonable depth as well. Well established. And there are a few areas where the shelving, the shallows, are much broader, and it's these areas that I'm going to kind of tap into. It would be an ideal place for me to position the marginal zones, the planting zones. I think this back section here looks like the pond liner comes quite a long way. It's very squishy around here, so these sorts of places will be ideal for me to fold the pond liner back, not looking at the camera, to dig down here to be able to create some of these sort of slightly deeper marginal sections and then bring the pond liner back up again. But like everything, we haven't got too strict a plan with this. It'll evolve organically, kind of make it up as we go along based on the materials that I start to unearth. There's an awful lot of rock and natural stone which I'm quite excited to get my hands on and see what it looks like. So when I start to bring that down, it'll give me a better idea of exactly what I'm going to do. It's a beautiful garden to be working in. This lovely terracing with this wonderfully natural stone that's established to create different levels. Good boy. This is Barney. He's come along to help, but what he's really trying to do is to nick my boots and gloves and all my tools. But he's a good boy, aren't you? Hey? Keep me company. I've got to watch you though, haven't I? Because you are a bit cheeky. Come on in. So making a bit of progress. It's amazing actually how much of the pond have been covered over by all this turf and grass. So we're reclaiming a lot of pond liner, and the pond is suddenly looking an awful lot bigger than I was expecting. I think it's mostly this area. That other side isn't going to be quite as bad as this. But I do need to try and get right back to an outer edge of liner that's above water level, so I can trim it if needs be, and then get underneath it and start to do a little bit of excavating to get the levels where I want them. In the meantime, it's quite difficult cutting all of this. I'm sort of going carefully up here with a spade above water level and just chopping down until I can feel the liner, and then peeling back this end here at the water's edge. And trimming from underneath. It's hard work, and this is heavy stuff when it's wet. First days are always the hardest. Right, that's the first go at hoiking up all the turf and all the edging, and I've exposed a nice large majority of pond line around the edge. That was hard work and messy work, and it's time to have something to eat. What's in my picnic basket today? I need a bit of protein. Some quark. What the heck is quark? Soft cheese. Okay. As long as it's got some calories and some protein, I'll eat it. Quark is good. Working underneath this lovely canopy of the Acer here, just digging up, I'll call it turf. It wasn't really, mostly moss and a layer of roots and bits and pieces, and just removed all of that vegetation so that later on in the job we can get a membrane down and this area can be gravelled, shingled, or incorporated as part of the beach around the pond area here. And the next stage of this for me is to try and work out where the low spots are in the pond. I want this end of the pond to be the low area. I want this area to be where the water drains off. There's a nice natural slope down this way, so it'll be an ideal place for any excess water to drain away to. But I have a feeling that the lowest spot of the pond is actually somewhere else. So once I've worked out where the low spot is and where I want to be able to hold the water level, I'll be able to know from there how deep down I have to dig some of the rock shelves and some of the planting zones. I think one of the most important things that you need to try and ascertain early on is what is going to be maximum water level, because that level, that height of water, is going to dictate everything beneath it. I've got my laser rigged up. I'm going to get my sensor and a little stick, measuring stick, and I'll work my way around the pond and start getting a little bit of references. Right, so I've just been going around with my little DeWalt laser module, firing a green laser which is much more visible outside rather than a red laser, and then I've got a little receiver as well here which enables me to be able to read the laser beam in brighter conditions. I can actually see the laser when I'm in the shadow with the Acer over here, but in these brighter conditions it's not quite so easy. So having this little receiver as well is really handy. And I've been able to work my way around the pond and work out that there's a difference of approximately 6 inches from the lowest spot to the highest spot. And the lowest point is over here. It's not massively lower, but it's an inch or two lower than what I want the overflow area to be. So now I can work out where the low spot is, I can work out where I want to hold the water level, and then I can work out how deep down I need to dig beneath that. And if you imagine that water level is here, I want to make sure that I've got a couple of inches of water above what will then be a bed of gravel. So we've got about 2 inches of water, and then we've got about 4 to 6 inches of gravel, which is going to be the marginal zones. So I need to dig 8 inches to 10 inches ish lower than what will be maximum water level to be able to accommodate a good planting depth of gravel and a little bit of water on top. Now when I'm doing the rock edging, I want to minimise how much stone and materials I'm going to use. Obviously the deeper I go down, the more rock there's going to be in the pond, and the less pond liner they'll be visible. But because this pond isn't filtered and it isn't always going to remain clear all year round, it's pointless having a great big thick wall of stonework because you're not going to enjoy it. The pond's not going to be clear enough to be able to see it. So again, I just want to make sure that I've got some stone which has got its feet in the water, but it finishes slightly above water level. So again, if this is water level, I want to dig a rock shelf probably about 4 inches lower, and that will accommodate a little bed of mortar on which it sits on, and then the stone itself, and then at the end of that the turf and the vegetation will fold back down and sit on top of that rock. That's the plan anyway. Big area and a lot of digging. So now I've worked out where the high and the low spots are, and I've just had a little bit of a final clearance around the edge. The next job is for me to be able to get underneath the lining so I can start to excavate the ground underneath. Now, I'm not going to uncover the edge, the loose edge of the pond liner, because the way this has been done is it's then been sort of dug down, rolled down into a trench much deeper underneath all of this message. So I'm going to trim and cut away the pond liner so I can then fold it back. It's always the scary bit. There's no going back once you've done that. Now this pond itself has been put in very nicely. So yeah, as expected, I expected to see some good quality pond fleece, which there is. Now and again as I'm working around here, I'm getting whiffs, very strong smells of grass snake. Well, I think it's grass snake, it's either grass snake or someone smoking some illegal substances over in the park, but I'm pretty sure it's grass snake. They've got a very distinctive kind of musky smell, and I know that there's a lot of them in the area. Now, this is testament to having a good quality pond liner when you're building a pond. This is a 1 mil thick, would have been called Firestone rubber at the time, it's now called Pond Guard. Really good durable lining, and it's still incredibly supple despite the age of it. And again, the pond fleece beneath this is in fantastic shape, much better shape than if you were using carpet or carpet underlay. So a really good reason to use good quality products when you're building ponds if you want them to last. I've just got a pair of damselflies land on my arm in breeding position. How lovely. Oh, and off they go. Right, a pair of lovebirds. So I have, I've worked out where I would like the water level to be based on what is the lowest point of the pond at that end, but obviously I want the low level to be over at the beach. So we can't come up any higher unless I start to build up the ground over there. So that really is what's going to dictate what water level will be, and then I've been able to drop the level down or up over there with the pond liner to be able to control that. So I'm now just going to go around with a little bit of red marker paint to make a bit more of a visible line in a few areas to give me a bit of reference. And there's nothing like using a bit of red paint to make you feel more professional. Look at that. Looks like I've had an accident and bled all over the ground. So now I've worked out where the water level is going to be, I can start to work my way down to decide how deep the marginal shelves are going to be and how much soil I need to remove. And as I said before, if this is going to be water level, I want to have 2 or 3 inches of water above what will be a gravel bed, and I need to have a reasonable depth of gravel in which the plants can root. So actually this kind of shelf level here is about perfect for me to build my marginal zones. This depth is going to allow for about 5 to 6 inches of gravel, perhaps a fraction more. And the broadest shelf, the area which had the most excess liner, is here where the tripod is standing. So we'll have a nice big marginal zone over here. We'll have the beach area over here, and then I'll try and incorporate another couple of marginal areas at the other side as well. Now obviously when you're doing stuff like this to an existing pond, you are being governed by how much pond liner there is, and that's always a good reason why you never want to cut the liner too short. Roll it, leave a little bit of excess, because by me digging this out, I'm actually going to then require slightly more liner to be able to get the liner up and over. And that's why I wanted to make sure when I was doing this that I first of all had dug out and was able to see exactly the final extremities of the pond lining to see how much overlap I had to work with. And the other thing you've got to be careful of is, quite often when you've got pond liner which is above water level originally, there might be damage to it and holes in it. In this instance, I've found lots of areas where there were little holes and spikes that were way above water level. But it may be that once I start to dig this out and I get that pond liner put back in again, suddenly those holes are now brought down to at or even below water level. So it may be that there's certain areas of the liner that would require some repair. Always keep an eye out for that. So I finished digging the main marginal zone, and I'm now working my way around the pond and doing a little rock shelf, making sure that I've got an area which is generally level, flat, onto which I can start to build up some stonework, and most importantly start lower than what will be maximum water level, so that when I start to build up this stone around the edge of the pond, it's got its feet sitting in the water, which is going to help to disguise some of that pond liner. This is hard ground to dig. It's a bit like digging in a gravel pit. It's just stones everywhere, and the soil itself is very sandy and very loose, but I'm getting there. Barney the spaniel's been coming around, being very affectionate and keeping me company, although I do seem to have misplaced a pair of gloves, which I think he might have wandered off with. Once I've done this, I can get the pond liner and the fleece folded back. I am going to put 2 or 3 extra layers of fleece around where I've been excavating. I've been bringing up stones to the surface, and there's an awful lot of them, and a lot of them are sort of sharp flints. So because we've got so much spare fleece left over from when this pond was done, it'll be a good idea for me to use that and to put a few extra protective layers down. And obviously doing this, I've now changed the footprint, the dimensions of the pond, which is going to alter the pond lining. So it'll be interesting for me to see when I've done this and when I pull the liner back, whether or not I have to make the pond a fraction smaller to compensate for the work I've done. Rocking my new vest once again. Stu, thank you very much, mate, for sending that to me. Much appreciated. So that's all the digging done, thankfully, or most of it anyway. I've gone around with my laser and just double checked all of the levels. It's amazing what you can do with a laser, how easy and convenient it is. And within 15-20 mil or so, it's all nice and level, which is perfect for underwater. Those sort of tolerances are fine. Now it's very, very stony soil. If I didn't have the benefit of this extra roll of fleece, I'd probably be inclined to spread a bulk bag or 2 of builder's sand, soft sand, around here to cover up a lot of the stones before putting some fleece down. But we've got a couple of layers of fleece here already, and then another whole roll of fleece here to use up. So I'm going to put 2 or 3 layers of this down. I've removed the worst of the stones, but there's lots and lots still in here. And then we'll get this pond liner and underlay folded back so I can see exactly how much liner I've got to play with. So I've got a bit of water in the pond overnight, still not fully full to its maximum level yet, but I've now got a little bit of damage around some of the areas of the pond liner that I'd like to pay attention to and put some patches on before we then put a bit more water in. Something like this, although probably again will be held above water level. It's a little bit too close to that level for my liking. That's the worst of it. There's a couple of small kind of holes dotted around as well. So I'm just going to put some patches over the top of this, and because I've got the luxury of being able to patch both the front and the rear, I'm going to put 2 on. I've given the liner a really good clean first of all with a bit of wire wool, just to get rid of some of the surface deposits and to add a little bit of micro scratching onto the surface, which will help the adhesive to pond better. I've cleaned both front and back, and then I've got some patches of the same liner. It's really important when you're patching liner to try and make sure that you use the same piece of liner as a patch, otherwise it won't bond quite as well. New pieces of liner like this, they tend to have kind of a greasy film, so they need to have a degrease and a good clean first of all, and again a bit of a scratch up with some wire wool. It's always best to cut your patches so that they're circular or oval rather than square. You don't want corners, because corners can catch and it's very easy then to pull and to lift off a patch. So best to try to round it off. The other thing you want to do is to make sure that they're dry. I'll have to dry that off again, and that both surfaces are dry. And I like to warm it through a little bit with a heat gun before applying the adhesive and then the patch. So I'm using some Gold Label pond or aquarium sealant. This one is black, and I'm going to put a couple of beads all the way around the outside of the patch, and then a centre one as well. Now this stuff is very, very sticky and very easy to make a bit of a mess with, so wear gloves and do it with clothes that you don't mind making a mess of. There you go. And I'm going to just gently squeeze this on, but I don't want to push the bead flat. That's all that needs, but what I also like to do, again, it's not a beauty contest, I like to just run another small bead around the outside and just smear it over with a finger. Like so. Now I shall move on to a couple of other areas of pond line that need attention, and then I'll come back to this one in about half an hour or so when it's a little bit tackier, fold it back over, and I'll do the patch on the front as well.